They docked 14% of my pay for tone. I did not protest. I opened a drawer, turned a brass key, and set down a record that could not be intimidated. North Shore Dynamics loved glass and slogans. I loved clean lines of evidence. While a favored vice president polished speeches, I traced the quiet roots of money and authorization, page by page, until a map appeared. Tonight I will show how a whisper became an audit, and how I walked out with peace, not permission. They docked 14% of my pay for tone. I did not argue. I slid open the bottom drawer, turned a small brass key and felt the weight of metal binders press against my palm. The first tab read one word that would matter later: receipts. North Shore Dynamics looked immaculate from the glass elevators. Polished floors, clean lines, framed awards about ethics and innovation. I had worked here for 17 years. My name is Mara Collins, Senior Finance Operations. My job was simple to describe and difficult to do. I kept the numbers honest. I closed gaps no one else could see. When auditors visited, they left with dry eyes and neat reports. That was my pride. Blake Renshaw arrived in spring with a smile built for press photos. He was the new Vice President of Strategy. He had a famous last name and a useful talent. He could lower a vendor's price by 8% with a single meeting and a charming pause. The problem hid inside the footnotes. He accepted language that sounded flexible and was in practice vague. That vagueness would break a service-level agreement when a system hiccuped at midnight. He did not see that part. I did. He liked momentum. He borrowed my deck for a budget review and returned it without comment. The next day he presented every slide, complete with one quiet typo I had left in haste. Millstone, not milestone. No one noticed the missing E. I did. The word hung in the projector light like a watermark. I said nothing. Silence is a stronger tool than a speech if you hold it with care. The first email arrived with a subject line that could have fit anywhere. A quick check-in. It copied human resources. It mentioned that my remarks in a meeting felt pointed. It asked if I could align with collaborative energy. I read it, sipped my coffee and filed it in a folder named Tone. The second message was briefer and colder. It attached a screenshot of my calendar. There were 2 hours marked Reconciliation Q2. Mara appears unavailable for strategic syncs, it said. Not a great signal. The third message did not even pretend to be neutral. Blake had announced a plan to name a few innovation sheriffs. I'd made a dry joke about hats and badges. People laughed. The email called it exclusionary. The word did not match the moment, but the word would travel farther than the joke. Human resources moved with practice. I sat in a small room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Olivia Hart, the HR director, folded her hands like a school headmistress and began to speak. Her phrases were smooth and well-worn. Psychological safety. Our shared norms. The need for respectful tone. Every sentence moved toward a sentence I had seen only twice in 17 years. We are docking 14% of your pay until a public apology is delivered at next week's all hands. She was precise. She was distant. She did not look cruel. She looked busy. I listened. I kept my shoulders level and my breath even. Then I said one word: understood. I stood, collected my notebook, and walked out into the corridor. The hallway glass reflected a woman in a navy sweater who did not hurry. I paused by the exit sign. The red light was steady and calm. If you have ever been labeled for tone when what you delivered was substance, subscribe and stay with me. This story has more layers than it first appears. I returned to my desk by the emergency stairwell. The stairwell was my choice. If a fire alarm howled, I would leave in 20 seconds with my purse, my drive, and my dignity. I opened the drawer that most people ignore. The brass key turned cleanly in the lock. North Shore was good at decoration, but its systems spoke a plain language. They recorded who logged in and when. They recorded who approved a wire and on which device. They recorded discrepancies between an invoice and a purchase order, even when the amounts matched to the cent. Numbers echo. They leave trails when people believe they are walking on air. I had watched the trails begin to braid. A generous completion bonus for a project that had never left development. 2 invoices to the same payee under 2 project codes, filed 5 days apart, and approved by different managers who never approved anything else together. A consultancy that used a mailbox at a shipping store that closed at 7. The signs were not dramatic. They were small and steady. They were consistent. I did not rage. I organized. The habit calmed me. I laid out color tabs on the desk. Bonus irregularities, duplicate vendors, contractor shadows, timestamp drift. Each label matched a rule I could cite. One rule mattered more than the others. FinAP 25K manual gate. Any payment over $25,000 required manual approval and a second set of eyes. When that rule was bypassed, the system created a flag. The flag did not shout. It whispered in the ledger. I had trained myself to hear whispers. Blake's 8% victory with a vendor had become a small storm. The vendor began to miss deliverables. The operations team filed service tickets. The tickets gained notes like stones in a jar. SLA breach, escalate, temporary workaround. The workaround had a cost. Costs want a home. Someone tried to tuck them into a discretionary line that looked large enough to hide a mistake. It was not large enough to hide a pattern. I thought about the meeting in HR. I thought about the word apology printed in a calendar invite like a stamp that will not rub off. I also thought about the people who worked in the building at midnight, who carried a second phone, who made the system steady when the website flickered. They did not have last names that opened doors. They had passwords and deadlines and careful hands. There is a moment when an idea stops being a thought and becomes an action. For me, it came with the soft scrape of the key leaving the lock. I placed the binders on the desk and aligned the edges. I made a checklist, not of plans but of proofs. If I ever stepped forward, the record would be complete, simple, and fair. I heard footsteps in the corridor. I closed the drawer. The office returned to its gentle noise. Keyboards, a distant printer. The elevator bell. The following morning, Blake forwarded a vendor summary with his name at the bottom. The summary used my format. It used my color code. It carried my single typo untouched. I smiled without warmth and sent the corrections to the controller. I sent no note to Blake. Air does not argue with a shadow. By evening, the building was nearly empty. I stood, stretched my hands, and looked at the red exit sign again. I thought about the speeches I would not make and the posture I would not adopt. I do not beg for scraps. I balance books. The light above my monitor dimmed to a gentle blue. I opened the drawer one last time that night and lifted the binders into the light. The tabs glowed like small flags in a quiet field. I set the first binder in the center and placed a blank sheet on top. I wrote a title with a black pen. The title was simple, Exhibits for Review. I listened to the room hold its breath, and then I turned the page. Night gave the office a clean geometry. Desks became islands. Screens became small lighthouses. I set the first binder in the center and opened to a list. The list was simple. Collect, verify, corroborate. Nothing would move forward without all three. I began with what could not argue with itself. The single sign-on logs. Every entry had a time, a device, a network path. I mirrored them against payment authorizations. Over $25,000, the policy demanded a second set of eyes. FinAP 25K manual gate. I printed the control description and slid it under a plastic sheet. Next to it, I placed the ledger detail for vendor invoices, then a narrow spreadsheet that tracked payroll exceptions by month. Numbers that do not wish to be seen huddle near other numbers. I separated them. One column at a time. Verification required patient triangulation. I moved through a three-step reconciliation for each red thread. Enterprise system to bank export. Bank export to email authorization. Email authorization to sign-on log. When two angles agreed, I waited. When all three aligned, I drew a small square in the margin and wrote one word. Confirmed. I treated every screen capture with care. Slack messages can mislead when ripped from context. I never clipped a line that could not carry its own weight. For each note, I preserved the time, the channel, the participants, and the thread that came before. A message that read, "Process this off-cycle," meant one thing when you saw an emergency repair. It meant another when you saw a discretionary payment minutes later. I did not cut to win a point. I drew a line to show a path. By midnight, I had a row of labeled folders, standing like narrow spines. Bonus irregularities, phantom vendors, contractor variants, expense duplicates, timestamp alteration, potential retaliation trail. I walked to the window and watched the parking lot hold its quiet. My reflection looked steady. My heartbeat did not. I needed anonymity that would survive inspection. I exported every exhibit into clean, portable document files. I stripped metadata twice, then verified the scrub with a separate tool. I encrypted archives with a passphrase I did not use anywhere else. I zipped each folder with a checksum and wrote the sums by hand on a yellow card. None of it felt dramatic. It felt like washing a patient instrument. I never used my own network. I left the building early the next evening and sat in a 24-hour cafe where the floor smelled like roasted beans and bleach. I tested links on a borrowed device. I sent nothing. I only rehearsed the motion of sending until my breathing slowed. The archive would travel only once, and it would travel clean. Ethics at North Shore had a quiet doorway. The hotline reported to the audit committee, not to human resources. I uploaded a short memo there first, with no attachments 10 days before any larger step. The memo did not accuse. It described controls that had failed and patterns that repeated. It included the policy names and the date ranges. A case number arrived with a gentle chime. I closed the screen and let the 10 days begin. Silence is not a void. It is a pressure. In that span, a new discretionary award appeared against a consultancy that had no meaningful history. The address was a post office box in a shipping store that closed at 7. I did not flinch. I added the award to bonus irregularities and attached a note about the address. I waited again. The 10th day fell on a Thursday. I chose a time that would feel precise but not theatrical. 22:58. In my living room, with the cat asleep under a chair, I opened the archive directory and checked every checksum against the yellow card. I prepared a single message. Subject line: internal irregularities, for audit chair only. Recipients: the chair, the general counsel, the chief financial officer, and the head of internal audit. The message body was the opposite of flourish. It listed the 6 folders by name. It described the method of collection, the controls in question, and the date windows. It included a short note in plain language. The files provide context before and after each decision point. The aim is correction, not spectacle. I attached nothing to the message itself. I included a secure link that would expire in 48 hours and a separate code that would expire with it. At 22:58, I pressed send. The air did not change. The room did not brighten or dim. A neighbor closed a door down the hall. I set my phone face down and folded my hands until the rhythm of my pulse matched the tick of the kitchen clock. The first ripple reached the office 2 mornings later. An internal notice arrived before 9. Temporary access freeze on select executive compensation and disbursement accounts during scheduled audit review. That phrase had a tidy politeness. The effect was not polite. Approval queues paused. Dashboards grayed. The room learned new quiet. Information technology pulled images of 4 workstations flagged as high risk. The team moved without fanfare, badge scanners and external drives in narrow cases. No one announced an investigation. No one used large names. People listened anyway. When a system shifts to manual review, the posture of a building changes. Conversations shorten. The space between words grows. Blake spoke less in public that week. His voice had always filled meetings with a confident brightness. Now it carried a small echo, as if he were testing the shape of each statement before releasing it. He asked one question about offshore exposure during a routine procurement call. No one answered. The call ended 5 minutes early. The glass conference room at the center of the floor blurred with motion. From my desk by the stairwell, I saw silhouettes and paper edges, a hand lifted, a pen set down. Victor Hale, the chief financial officer, stood at the head of the table with his jacket off and his tie knotted high. Legal sat opposite him, then internal audit, then human resources with a stack of folders pressed close to the chest. I did not hear their words. I did not need to. A sentence formed in my mind, calm and exact. When the system moves to manual, it is no longer policy. It is exposure. By midweek, the head of internal audit requested sampling on discretionary bonuses and contractor variance for 2 quarters. The request did not mention names. It did not need to. The samples curved in one direction, and that curve became a pattern you could see from the hallway. Late that afternoon, I received a calendar invite from Human Resources. Draft of apology for next Monday's newsletter. The title wore a cheerful tone like a bright scarf on a grey day. I looked at the screen for a full count of 5. I clicked decline and returned to my reconciliation queue. Before the hour closed, 2 people from information technology and 1 from legal walked directly to Blake's office. The door opened. Words were exchanged with care. I saw a hand extend toward a laptop. I saw the delicate resistance that precedes surrender. Then the device slid into a case. A badge followed, placed on top like a small flat coin. No one raised a voice. I kept my gaze on the numbers in front of me. The cell grid calmed me, even as the floor shifted under it. I completed a vendor recode, verified an authorization chain, and saved the file to the ledger. The building exhaled in a long, thin breath. Somewhere a printer clicked. Somewhere a message arrived and went unread. I closed the binder and aligned its edge with the desk. The invite from Human Resources stayed in my inbox with a faint grey line through it. The Access Freeze banner floated in the corner of my dashboard like a winter flag. I did not stand. I did not speak. I let the stillness hold. Then I turned off my screen and for the first time that week allowed myself to feel the gravity of what had moved. Monday arrived with the quiet of freshly fallen snow. No reminder about an apology sat in my inbox. No cheerful calendar block with a bright ribbon of color. Instead, there was a row of meetings held by people who rarely shared a table. The audit committee had taken the day. The schedule looked like a sealed corridor, hour after hour with no air between. North Shore dynamics felt different in the morning light. Conversations paused at doorways. Keyboards spoke in measured bursts. I could sense a careful distance in the way colleagues passed each other, an invisible boundary that formed when a system decides to look at itself without blinking. Rumors do not run. They walk. By 10 o'clock, one reached my desk and stood still. An external audit firm had been engaged for limited sample testing. No names, no banners, no speeches. Just the suggestion of additional hands opening drawers that had been closed. The first formal signs appeared not in emails but in the numbers themselves. In the incentive dashboard, 2 discretionary awards inverted. A line that had pointed outward drew itself inward, as if the system had corrected a set of small, deliberate tilts. In the vendor registry, a handful of entries faded at once. The names did not delete dramatically. They dissolved like chalk in rain. It was not spectacle. It was repair. At 11:30, internal audit requested a cross-plot of complaint timestamps and control exceptions. The request was technical and concise. I forwarded a standardized report that matched HR tone flags to the dates when I had stopped payments for lack of documentation. The pattern did not shout. It spoke with a steady voice. A complaint followed a control. The company handbook's anti-retaliation policy had a simple sentence that mattered now. No adverse action may be taken in response to a good faith concern regarding compliance. I did not underline it. I did not have to. By early afternoon, a second internal notice went live. Reversal posted. It sat on the financial home screen in a muted frame. In the payables module, the no PO, no pay rule tightened with a small but decisive click. Lines that had once accepted exceptions now declined them. The system had moved from polite suggestion to firm boundary. The human changes came with the same quiet. Blake Renshaw did not lead the weekly strategy call. A brief message replaced his name. Administrative leave pending investigation. There were no adjectives. There was no defense. There was only the absence of a familiar voice. The door to Olivia Hart's office stood open for the first time in years. A box sat on her desk. A plant with glossy leaves rested on top, leaves shining as if the sun had found them at last. By 3, her badge had been turned in, and a message marked her departure as mutual. The word felt overly careful. Like a glass set down too gently, I worked through my queue without ceremony. Reconciliations, verifications, corrections. The routine steadied me, yet under it a larger tide had turned. Every control that once seemed like a suggestion now felt like a hand on the rudder. Near 4 o'clock, a message from Victor Hale appeared on my screen. Please stop by. No header, no preface. I picked up a plain envelope and walked down the long corridor where the windows reflected the day as a pale ribbon. Victor's office was orderly in a way that was not cold. He stood when I entered and gestured to the chair. His jacket was on the rack. His sleeves were rolled to the exact same height on both arms. He said my name with a weight that was neither heavy nor light, as if he had rehearsed a tone that would not bend. I set the envelope on his desk and slid it forward until the edge caught the light. "This completes the trail," I said. Inside were the maps that finally locked two worlds together, bank authorization logs, email approvals page by page, date by date. Each entry included the device signature and the second approver when FIN-AP 25K manual gate should have engaged. Where the process had been honored, the line was whole. Where it had been bypassed, the line broke. The map did not accuse. It revealed Victor did not reach for the envelope. For a moment he simply looked at it, then at me, then back to it again. He nodded once. The nod held gratitude without asking for thank yous, held sorrow without asking for apologies. He did not say well done, he said nothing. It was enough. I stood. He did the same. We were two careful people honoring a principle that had carried both of us through storms. Let the record speak, and let the record be clean. The hallway outside was almost silent. The late shift of sunlight lay across the carpet in long gold rectangles. I walked to my desk and powered down my screen. The fan inside the machine slowed to a hush, and then there was only the soft ambient breath of the building, as if the structure itself had chosen to rest. I opened my drawer and took out my badge. The plastic felt lighter than it had in the morning. I slipped it into my palm, closed my hand, and then opened it again. I pictured the first day I had worn it. I had walked these halls in shoes that pinched, and a suit that did not yet fit my shoulders. Today the badge did not feel like a key. It felt like a chapter break. I crossed the floor alone. The custodian's cart whispered at the end of the corridor and turned away. In the glass I saw a woman with a steady face and a calm spine. I saw a person who had kept the numbers honest and had asked for nothing she did not earn. At the gate, I placed the badge on the security desk with my fingertips. It made a sound like a small bell. There is a sentence I had carried for weeks without saying. It arrived now, clear and entire. I am not leaving because I lost. I'm leaving because I have won, and I do not need a stage to prove it. At the elevator, I paused and looked back at the rows of screens asleep in the soft light. Somewhere behind them, lines had been corrected. Bonuses had been returned where they belonged. Vendors had been removed like weeds neatly pulled from a bed. The work would continue without my hands, because the structure had been reminded of its spine. If this story mirrors a moment in your life where substance was mislabeled as tone, subscribe, and stay with me, there is more to say about what comes after repair. The elevator doors opened with the gentle parting of steel and light. I stepped inside. As the doors began to close, my phone vibrated once. I hesitated, then looked. A single email had arrived from the audit chair. Thank you to the anonymous source whose documentation allowed us to restore our controls. If you are willing to speak in a protected setting, reply with a single word, yes. The door slid shut. The floor moved. The building lowered me toward the evening, as if releasing a breath it had held too long. I held the phone in my hand, felt the quiet weight of that single word, and understood that peace could be both gentle and exacting at once. They told me to apologize for a tone. I answered with a record. It did not roar. It did not accuse. It simply stood upright and asked to be read. When the doors of the elevator closed and the building slid past like pages turning, I understood something I wish I had known years ago. You do not need a louder voice to be heard. You need a cleaner line. There is a quiet courage that does not perform. It moves through checklists. It numbers exhibits. It aligns columns until patterns confess themselves. I did not win because I found a perfect speech in a conference room. I won because I allowed the facts to hold their shape when pressure tried to bend them. If there is a lesson here, it is not triumph over an enemy. It is fidelity to the structure that keeps good work from becoming theater. Policies exist to protect the careful and to restrain the careless. When they fail, the failure is not abstract. It lands on people who stay late, sign for deliveries, repair systems in the dark hours, and return home without applause. If you are one of them, know this: you are not invisible. Integrity leaves traces. Your craft is its own witness. I have replayed the moment when I placed the envelope on the CFO's desk. No victory music played. No crowd gathered. The room held a stillness I can describe only as respect, not for me alone, but for the idea that an organization can correct itself when shown the right map. Perhaps that is the most hopeful part. Repair may be slow, but it is possible. I also learned to measure silence differently. There is a silence that erases and a silence that concentrates. The first asks you to shrink. The second asks you to choose your step. I chose to walk out with my badge on the table and my name intact. That to me is peace. If any part of this story rests near your own, I would like to hear it. The comments below are not a courtroom. They are a small room with chairs where careful people can speak without being rushed. Tell me where you stood. Tell me what you carried in your hands when you left. If you found value here, consider staying for the next chapter. Subscribe so the next story finds you, and share this one with someone who is navigating a dim corridor and searching for a door that opens. Not all battles are won by volume. Some are won by keeping the ledger straight, by honoring the rule that requires a second set of eyes, and by trusting that truth, once placed in order, knows how to move on its own.